So I want to start by thanking you, and I'd like to thank the warm welcome that we've received from the university. It's lovely to meet new colleagues working in the same field as the Design My Future project is in. It's always good to meet new colleagues like that. So thank you for the warm welcome. And I'd also like to thank Pedro for all the organisation that he's done with the team here in setting up this conference. We all know that there's lots of things go on underneath the surface, and Pedro always looks like a swan gliding through the project, but I know that he's paddling furiously underneath. So thank you very much, Pedro. And I'm standing up here to start the introduction, not on behalf of myself. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a co-principal investigator with my colleague, Dr. Mark Fabry. We both work at Leeds Beckett University, but we're actually in different schools. So we're not just transnational, we're transdisciplinary as well. Mark will introduce himself later on, but I am a professor of social and educational inclusion at the Carnegie School of Education. But as you will see as we go, you hear from each of the team members, each of us work in quite different organisations with quite different remit, quite different expertise, but I think that's made this project a little bit stronger. Now, it was introduced to you as the PCAP project in making informed choices, but actually once we started the project, we decided to change the name for a variety of reasons. But we actually decided to change it to Design My Future. So the website that you need to look at to see all the resources we made is actually called Design My Future. And that's the login there. And by the end of February, all the materials should be there. At the moment, it's just a sort of introduction. So just in case somebody's got their laptop out and they're looking for the materials, they will be there by the end of February. So this particular conference is an opportunity for us to share the work we've been doing for 3 years and 4 months, and probably actually even a little bit beyond that, because we actually started thinking about what the project would be like. So we've probably been working on this project for about 4 years now, and we got an extension because we couldn't meet in person. It's an Erasmus Plus funded, which the EU do like us to advertise it, but we've managed to cover it up in the corner there. Are we okay? I'll move it up, just, yeah. There we go. Yep. Yeah, that's okay.
Compartilhar se ecrã mesmo que assim.
Yes. Go. This is good. Oh, I can. Oh yes, I suppose I could. Yeah. There we go. So welcome also to those of you joining online. One of the benefits of pandemic is that we have learned to be online. We've learned to be in a hybrid form. So it's really lovely to see so many faces popping up when we were getting ready just now. And hopefully you have the slides now. So as I was saying, the project was about informed choices, the original title, but we've changed it to Design My Future. And one of the reasons for that was we really wanted it to be the young people themselves to drive the project. So it was about the young people themselves designing their own future. So a little bit first of all about, let me see. There we go. A little bit first of all about the motivation behind the project. Each of the project partners in a different way works with young people who face challenges. They're not difficult young people, they're facing challenges because of the society that's around them, the expectations that we have of that society, the way that education is set up, because they come sometimes from different communities to what education is set up for. Education is often set up in many European societies for a sort of normal child and doesn't really take in the complexity of the different young people who come into our classrooms, who come into our colleges, who come into our universities. And so this project is really about those who come into education and it doesn't perhaps suit them particularly well. And so the EU, as many of us do, are really concerned about the fact that many of those young people, the way that we've set education up, the way that society is set up, means that they make that decision to leave school early. And the statistics show that the work that the EU are doing is actually still improving the numbers so that fewer. So back in 2010, 13.8% there were early leavers aged 18 to 24. So we're not even looking at those young people who disappeared from compulsory schooling. These are those who have gone on to college or education. Down to 9.9 by 2020. I wonder, with the pandemic and the challenges that all our young people, which is clearly evidenced in the research that's been done, I'm worried that that number has gone up. And I think some of the statistics that you see down the right-hand side are really concerning. Well, it's not obvious, but the numbers are lower for women and also for those who are born in a country. But if we think about people who have immigrated into that country, that's a really scary percentage, 22.4, who drop out between 18 and 24 from educational provision. Now, I'm going to be a bit critical of the EU now, because I think the EU come at this challenge for us as educators from quite an economic standpoint. I think they see the purpose of education to a certain extent as providing people who are then going to contribute economically to society. I think a lot of people look at education as creating, and think about the way our curriculum is set up. Healthy, all the work around well-being, mental and physical health. Literate, the push we have for all our young people to be literate. Numerate, worker bees, that then join our economic society and contribute economically. And that's valid. However, this project wanted to look at it from the young person's point of view. Because if an individual does not receive from education the opportunity to thrive in later life, ends up leaving school or college or university without the skills that they need, then that can have long-term economic issues for them, social issues for them, health and well-being issues for them. Many of you will have read I think he's based in Cambridge at the moment, but he's actually an Indian philosopher, Amartya Sen. And he challenges that notion of education being about providing literate, numerate, healthy worker bees. And actually, he challenges educators to think of education as a means, a process of allowing each individual to live a life that they value, not dictated by economic society, but dictated by what the individual wants to do with their life, what their community would see as healthy well-being for the rest of their lives. So I think in many ways, although we never articulated it as a team, I think that we were being driven by that notion that Amartya Sen talks about in his writing, where we were looking about how could we make education more fit to allow those young people to make their own choices about what their life would be, so that they could then go on and live a life that they value. And part of that is about learning, picking up the skills and competences, but also being able to make informed choices about the work that they're going to do, the career, or these days, careers that they're going to follow through the rest of their lives. So our response to this was this aim, and this was the aim for the project. We wanted the resources that we created to reduce early school leaving so that young people working with their teachers or vocational educators or university lecturers saw a reason for staying on in educational provision. But also we wanted resources that would allow them to make positive decisions about their future. Not ones that were imposed on them, but ones where they could take agency and make the decisions that were right for them. Maybe also right for their family, maybe also right for their community. And prevent young people from entering the job market with insufficient skills, or perhaps the wrong skills and competences and attitudes, I would argue, so that they end up in the wrong career. So that's what this project was all about. We had 6 partners in this project, because the idea was that by bringing people from different national contexts, and this is what Erasmus Plus is all about, it's about sharing expertise across Europe. Each of the partners brings a different remit. Each of the partners brings a different expertise, a different focus, a different geographical location, and a different policy context. I think as we went through the project, we also found some cultural differences between the different, and that often caused quite a lot of amusement and some confusion at times. But it's been a really interesting process to work across these. So starting at the north, we really went for geographical diversity. I mean, we couldn't have been more further north or further south if we tried. Maybe Gibraltar, maybe the Canaries, that would have worked, wouldn't it? So the University of Tromsø, and unfortunately our colleagues couldn't attend because they're watching student presentations all this week. It is the most northerly university in Europe. We worked with 2 colleagues, Ingrid and Gregor, who work in the education department there. Gregor works in the Tromsø campus and Ingrid works in the Harstad campus, which is just a little bit further south, barely recognisable on that map. They do a lot of work around special educational needs provision, inclusion, but also they both work with the Sami University up there, so working with the indigenous local communities, even further north in Alta as well. As far south and west as possibly we could have gone, we were working with PIN and with Pedro in Lisbon, providing psychological services in Portugal. Also quite far south, our colleague Georgia was in charge of quality assurance, and she works for CESI, who are an organisation who are involved in multiple European projects, and based in Palermo in Italy. Moving up a little bit, and this is not the first time I've worked with these colleagues, a wonderful organisation in Ljubljana in Slovenia, the National Education Institute of Slovenia. And they have responsibility for providing professional development for all qualified practicing teachers in Slovenia. So a huge role for them. And you are also involved in a number of different projects. I've got another one with other colleagues that work with them. Each of these colleagues will come up and you'll get to hear about their specific role. And then in the UK, we have 2 organisations, Mark and I's University, but also a head partnership, which is a non-governmental charity-based organisation which provides careers advice for young people in is it just secondary schools? Yes, secondary schools and primary across of Yorkshire. So a wonderful forward-thinking organisation, I think, but also a very creative one. So they'll also be coming up to tell you a little bit about their participation in the project. So the way that we went about the project, we wanted the project to be co-participatory. We didn't want to just come up with the resources ourselves. We wanted to take that opportunity. I don't know if you've heard of the phrase, nothing for us without us. And we decided that no way could we make resources unless we got the opinions, the experiences, the aspirations of all of the key stakeholders. So I would say the first 2 years, because it took us longer than we had expected, we actually collected data from each of the key stakeholders that would eventually be using the resources we had planned and were designing. So we created surveys for teachers and parents, which were online surveys because we were in the middle of the pandemic. But we also did focus groups with teachers and young people once the restrictions had lifted a little bit, so that we could drill a little bit further down. But also because we thought that a lot of the young people, because we really wanted to target young people in the various categories that might find this challenging, that we knew from the research would find that making informed choices quite challenging. And we decided that focus groups would be a more appropriate methodology than asking them to fill in a written online survey. Each of these activities we did on a national basis, first of all. So it was done in the partner language, and each of the organisations then analysed on an individual national basis. And we thought that was really important because each of those people are working within specific policy contexts in their own situation. And then we took the findings from each individual nation and we brought it together. And most of that was actually done, I'm checking with my colleagues, but most of that was actually done in online meetings, where we went through, each of the partners brought key themes to an online meeting, presented it, and then the partners looked through it and analysed what were the commonalities and differences. And that was a really interesting part of the project. And I guess that's what Erasmus is all about, was understanding why there were the same things, but also why there were differences across the different national contexts. We then started to think about, right, we've got some understanding now of the challenges and the issues facing teachers, and some of us were teachers at one point. We understand some of the challenges, the frustrations that parents are feeling when they're trying to help young people, and we really do understand what some of the young people are feeling. That was really important, that we heard young people. So often young people, particularly from those groups, sometimes they're listened to, but they're not heard. And so we tried really hard to hear and give them their voice. And from that, we had ideation sessions with the project partners. And we also realised that there was actually, from the work that we did, gathering data, we realised there was really good practice going on in this topic across Europe. And we wanted to gather that and really capitalise on the good practice that was already happening in many of the countries that we were working in. So the resource has been co-designed, and we really hope, well, do you know what, we know actually that that's worked, because we've already done some piloting, and the feedback that we're getting from teachers, from parents, and from young people, because we asked, well, what did we get wrong? What do you want us to change? And we're getting really small things back to change. I don't think anybody's come back and went, well, that doesn't align with my understanding of the situation. But we're getting really positive feedback from all three stakeholders. So the project resources. And I'm not going to speak about these for very long, because actually each of the teams who were responsible, we all worked on all of the resources, but the teams who took responsibility for leading them, each of them are going to come up and talk about them in a little bit more detail. But just to give you an idea of what's coming up, the first one were a guide and some training videos for teachers. So the guide will be in digital form, it will be free to access and downloadable, and it gives strategies for promoting learning opportunities in classes. including how to develop the kind of 21st century skills and competences. You know, facts, do we need to teach them anymore? Because it's all on the web. But I think we've begun to understand that actually what we need to do is change the pedagogy so that young people develop, learn, capture a range of 21st century skills and competences which employers say they need once they join the current workforce. The second part of the guide deepens teachers or gets them to think about the student identities of the young people, and particularly the experiences, particularly if they come from potentially marginalised or vulnerable backgrounds. If a teacher doesn't come from a Roma community or hasn't been a migrant, we're hoping that some of the information in the latter part will give them an insight into the experiences those young people have had. And then we also have some associated training videos because we wanted the resources to be multimodal. And there we've provided a guide with some reflective questions so that it can be used in schools as a CPD tool. We also have a guide for parents and carers, because we're really aware that elderly people like me, the world of work has changed. I think there's some research out to say that young people who are 16, and I can see some of them here, up to 30, you won't have one career. You'll probably have 7 careers, they say. And people will, it's not just about the precarity of work and the fact that it's really hard to get a permanent contract, but young people travel more. They change their career halfway through. They might change it again. People change their career. They don't sign up to be an accountant when they're 18 and they're still an accountant at 60, the way that it would have been in the 20th century. The 21st century is going to be very different, the world of work. So we wanted to provide a guide for parents to help them understand how the world of work had changed and how they could work with their young people to think about a future career. And what was really interesting was understanding how the parents had made a choice about the career they were in. We also wanted some examples, and the parents have said that having case studies in there has been really helpful. And last but not least, we have a game, because we wanted, this is getting back to that, the young people taking the agency themselves, having the responsibility, not being told what they should be doing with the rest of their career. And so this game is a space for people to explore their skills, but also their hobbies, their interests, and find out what possible future jobs would match those skills that they feel they have. We're using a space travel metaphor, and we hope it's fun. And it's based on the European ESCO database of occupational skills. And so far, although we haven't, it's still in development, we'll be able to show you a little bit about it today. Mark, show it to you. We've had some really positive feedback from the young people. We were a bit worried it was, they would go, oh, well, it's not Minecraft, it's not FIFA. But actually, they're really enjoying looking at it. They're looking forward to it, and it does look quite fun. So this is the plan for the whole day. It's been changed slightly because we don't have a keynote, so they gave me a little bit extra to talk about the background to the project. And each of the national teams are going to come up and explain one of the resources to you, and then Mark and I will finish up at the end. There's also some refreshments in the middle, a little bit of a break. And then this afternoon in Portuguese, our colleague Pedro will do some work with teachers.